Our next guest knows what it's like to work in a winning administration. Joining us now to react to the disaster that is the first 150 days of the Biden administration, Arkansas gubernatorial candidate and former White House press secretary. You all know her, Sarah Sanders. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, and it's always great to be with you, with my good friend Benny. So things are going great back here in Arkansas, unlike how they are going in Washington right now under this current administration.
Give the president a grade. How has the first 150 days been? You've seen the first 150 days of an administration taking form, handling problems. Obviously, every administration, you have a little ups and downs. How's Biden doing?
You know, right now it's hard to find anything that is going well under this administration. You have a complete failure at our border, something that President Trump had worked hard to address, and we were making significant progress on. Now we have an absolute crisis, humanitarian, national security, health crisis at the border, and it is at the direct hand and result of this administration. They aren't only making the problem worse, they actually created this crisis at the border and have failed to address it. They have handled the economy terribly. They're actually paying workers to stay home. There are so many different businesses, every industry that I talk to, both here in Arkansas and around the country, says they are struggling to find workers because people can make more money sitting at home doing nothing than they can showing up and earning a paycheck. That is not how it's supposed to work in this country. On foreign policy, a complete and total disaster. Look at the relationship with our great ally in Israel and how that has been just an utter failure from the very beginning. It is hard to find a single thing that is going well under this administration.
Sarah, you have felt the immense pressure of speaking on behalf of the leader of the free world. You felt that weight on your shoulder for years, and you did it magnificently. I wouldn't ask you to critique Jen Psaki in so much as how hard is her life when she's speaking on behalf of a president who doesn't speak English, who is in a perpetual battle of the titans with his own teleprompter. How hard would it be to actually say his message when he doesn't say it in the English language?
Well, look, I think it's one of the hardest jobs in all of American government to be the press secretary at the White House. You are constantly trying to relay someone else's thinking under some of the most intense circumstances. And so there are certainly a lot of difficulties. In my case, I had a president who was so accessible, who spent a significant amount of time talking directly to the press and the American public himself, which came with its own set of challenges. But with her, she has someone who, frankly, is mostly incoherent, making it a lot harder, I think, sometimes to speak on his behalf. But one of the things that I find the greatest amount of frustration is not even with the administration and Jen Psaki, but it's with the press corps themselves. They refuse to hold this administration's feet to the fire and continue to be the propaganda arm of the Democrat Party and of this administration. They are doing nothing but basically running advertisements for this administration on the regular basis. If you look at the comparison and coverage, which I know you've spent a significant amount of time doing, it is night and day the way that they cover these issues. Look at just the border crisis alone. This is a crisis created at the hands of this administration, and yet it is widely ignored by the mainstream media. And when they do ask questions, there are no follow-ups. It's not a hard push, and the headlines are basically praiseworthy versus what the Trump administration went through. This was at a time when my family was kicked out of a restaurant. We were harassed. The president was targeted on the hour, every hour, for trying to secure our border. And so just look at the comparison in the coverage, and it could not be more starkly different. And that's probably one of the greatest frustrations I have watching from the outside at this point.
Yeah, Sarah, how much would your hair have been on fire if you had looked at your phone and said, oh, Mike Pence just said he'd rather be in Europe than on our southern border? Like, would that have been a DEFCON 9 in your White House?
Well, it depends on the day because we had a few DEFCON 9s in our White House. But certainly it would have been nonstop news coverage. And
Yeah.
we would have spent days and days on end responding to questions and inquiries and headlines had he made a comment as absurd and ridiculous as that one.
Yeah.
However, it's a quick blip and the conservative media covers it and the rest of the mainstream media quickly moves on. The biggest problem I have is that there's no accountability in journalism and they aren't holding this administration accountable for the actions and frankly the entire and complete failures that they have brought upon the country.
Yeah. Final question here, Sarah. Speaking of complete and utter failures and your ability to comment on them, Kamala Harris brought back cookies of her own face to the press corps. Now, these cookies, not the most attractive looking cookies, honestly. And I've seen your baked goods. I mean, you know what you're doing. Can you critique these cookies and, most importantly, the press's reaction to getting little treats from this administration and how they squee when they get them?
Look, I'm not going to comment on the look of the cookie, but I do think that this is another example of the press catering and kowtowing to the this administration and their willingness to continue to be that propaganda arm. I think one of the reasons you're seeing people like myself and others who were part of the process in the Trump administration over the last 4 years continue to engage in the process. One of the reasons I'm running for governor of Arkansas is to fight back against the radical, out of control agenda that's coming out of Washington and that is being continually perpetuated by the left-wing media. And we have to continue to fight back. We have to continue to stay strong and focused on our message. And I think that ultimately will be what allows us to take back the House in 2022, as well as a number of governor's offices around this country, which will be our firewall and our last line of defense, pushing back against that craziness coming out of Washington and coming from the media.
That's right. Our entire show is about how this administration, their push for radical socialism and racism and so many other fronts is inspiring great candidates and people to step up with high energy. You are one of those candidates. Good on the Arkansas press corps, because when you are governor, you will bake cookies, maybe with your face on them. I doubt you would ever do that, but at least your cookies would be edible and delicious. And man, they are lucky there in Arkansas. Really, the entire state is lucky to have you. Thank you, Sarah, so much for joining us.
You bet. Thanks so much, Benny, for having me.
Exactly who we were talking about. Sarah Sanders running for office and doing God's work, getting out there and getting into the field. So amazing.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.